So just over 1 day ago, I released this video called Huge Changes Revealed for 2.5, where I went over the full list of all the changes coming in 7 Days to Die 2.5. And one of the big changes was the return of the jars that used to be in the game, and one of the big caveats to that was that they would not be reusable or craftable, so in a sense they weren't fully returning the feature. This has most definitely been greeted with considerable hostility from a large amount of my commenters. I think 1 in every 2 comments at least is about how jars aren't going to be reusable. It's evident that the community, or at least my community, wasn't particularly happy with the implementation of jars even before the update came out. And there's been a lot of talk about the fun pimps not listening or being too stubborn and stuff, and maybe there's elements of truth to that, but today I actually have some rather good news for you. Over on the fun pimps forums, Madmole, or Joel Huning as you may know him, appeared out of the blue to give us a Merry Christmas message. So, it seems Christmas is coming early. Jars are back, they can be crafted with a crucible, and we're adding a refund option with percentage chance. 0 is the default, and then there is 10 to 100%, and 10% increments, last he heard. Now everyone can eat glass on this topic, or not eat glass. Choice is yours lol, Merry Christmas everyone. So the fun pimps definitely have been listening to the response on glass jars, and they've definitely been, I don't know if it's specifically listening to me, but they've been listening to people like me at the very least who have been saying just make everything a menu toggle, and this was probably the best option because there's plenty of people who really don't like that jars return because it clutters their inventory and they're just used to how the game works, and there's plenty of people who do like that jars return because it's more immersive and logical, and yes, it will make water easier, but there's just other things to worry about in a survival game, I think. So yeah, you'll have a menu toggle to just do whatever the fuck you want for it, basically, and I think that's the best option for everybody. And it's such a simple thing to implement as well, because it'll likely just be an XML line or 2, and there you go. Everybody gets exactly what they want out of the jars feature. If you're sick of hearing about jars, if you're sick of the community moaning and bitching and whining about jars, I'm using those words from the perspective of someone who does want jars, those are the things I keep hearing, and if you're somebody who really didn't like that the fun pimps put in like a half measure for jars, boom, there's your solution. Can't argue with it. To be completely honest, there is the solution. You can do it if you want, and you can do it on console, so there's no like, oh well, you could have modded it anyway. You can never mod on console, so that's never an excuse. This solves that problem. We can all shut the fuck up about jars. Except, I would like to talk about the topic of water scarcity in 7 Days to Die. There's a lot of people who think that adding the jars back is going to make water too easy, and there's a lot of people as well who disagree with that. And it kind of stems from 2 ways of thinking about this game. Some people want it to be immersive, and some people want it to be challenging, and I would like it to be both. I don't think that water is the avenue that this game should really be challenging on. Here's why. Joel Huning in particular here has stated on Reddit that he thinks that water should be scarce because like movies and stuff have said that in the zombie apocalypse water would be scarce. And I don't know if there's any merit to that because I don't really watch zombie movies, but let's assume he's right about that. The thing about that is it's just not true. And just because a movie says something should be some way doesn't mean that everybody's going to think that way. The simple truth of the matter in a zombie apocalypse, if we accept the stupidity of the premise for a moment, is that you should be able to collect water from a water source if there is no reason for that water source to be tainted. So for example, Arizona, where this game is set, absolutely covered in rivers and natural water sources. Sure, some places it's probably harder than others, but if you can find a river, you can clean the water and you can drink it. It's just that simple. If the fun pimps want to make a game where water is extremely scarce, the best solution, I think, would be to rework your maps entirely so that there isn't loads of water sources everywhere. People don't typically respond to artificial challenge, which is what the water changes were. This idea that the only way my character could collect water being a barrel with a tarp attached to it that draws water in from the air when you're in the continental United States where there's plenty of water that you can just filter and boil and drink. Doesn't make sense, does it? If they kind of wanted the water to be scarce, I would say make a scarce water setting, make it like a whole desert setting and have it be really hard to keep up on hydration because there's few water sources, and You could kind of go, this is like a throwback here, but you could kind of go Ark Survival Evolved Scorched Earth DLC with it and implement loads of really, really harsh weather effects that make it so that water is exceptionally valuable if you wanted water to be a challenge. And quite frankly, I just think that given the setting, it just doesn't need water scarcity. It just doesn't. The challenge should probably come from zombies, and indeed, if you wanted to talk about making survival more harsh, number one, adding the temperature back like you did was the obvious choice here, and making storms more dangerous like you have is the obvious choice, and I don't think we need to fight over water. It's just not that rare as a concept. Water is everywhere on Earth, and it's not particularly rare in the United States. Even if you destroy all their infrastructure, there's rivers everywhere. So if my character can stand next to a water source, then my character should be able to get water. Simple as that. Now, in that same vein, there is a comment to be made here about abstraction. That is a defense the Fun Pimps have made of the lack of water jars, where basically in video games there's a thing called abstraction, and I'm not talking about code for the programmers, I'm talking about concepts. Abstraction is where you kind of take tedious details out. For example, when you fill your car with gasoline in 7 Days to Die, you don't get a gas can back that you can then go and refill, and plenty of people would like that mechanic. I would like that mechanic. It would add like an element of finding a cool item that I need to keep on me and keep a supply of, but that's beside the point. Why are we fine with gasoline working that way? Well, it's because it's an abstraction, but it's an effective abstraction because it doesn't bother anybody. The reason that the lack of jars was an ineffective abstraction is because it caused a cognitive dissonance between me standing in front of a running water source and not being able to pick up the water in any way. Jars didn't need to come back. That's my hot take. If they had just allowed us to like press E on the water and get some water in our inventory, literally every problem solved, there's no jars needed. That would have been an effective abstraction. The jars being removed and the only source of water we have being loot and dew collectors was an ineffective abstraction because it was a distracting abstraction, whereas the other abstractions in this game aren't that distracting. Now, there's obviously the comment to be made about like, well, you can carry 6,000 lead, 6,000 wood and all this stuff, and it's like, yeah. And if you ask the people who want jars back, they wanted the option to have like a weight-based inventory so they couldn't do that, they would probably say yes. So that's kind of like a pointless critique of this idea. It's like, yeah, no, I would love a weight-based inventory system, but I know that that's a lot of development resources to make a whole new inventory system that most players are going to find too tedious to use. So don't do it. Or do it, I don't care. Make it a menu toggle. Make as much as you want, just make them all menu toggles. The point being here that I have seen a lot of bad faith takes on the jars discussion on both sides, but particularly on the other side where they're just like, well, everything is kind of stupid in this game, so why does this matter? Because it's a survival game and I was unable to collect water at a water source. That's why it was a problem. You can get rid of jars if I can collect water from a water source in some way. Look at the Long Dark, for example. The Long Dark does not have any true water scarcity. The entire map is covered in snow. You have a cooking pot or an iron can, you have infinite water. Is that game easy to survive in? No, but it's realistic about its setting. You need to drink. The world is made of drink. Problem is not that difficult to solve. The way the Long Dark actually does this, though, is by creating fuel scarcity so that you have to be very intelligent about when you're boiling water so that you're not wasting your valuable fuel. 7 Days to Die does not have fuel scarcity, and it probably never will because there's trees everywhere and we have axes, and it operates on a more abstracted level than the Long Dark, and that is okay. So yeah, I'm happy to see that they've listened to this critique and they've implemented it in sort of like the best way they could. They view jars as completely unbalanceable, but they heard that you want them anyway, and they gave you the option to have them and even to tweak the precise balancing of it if you want. This is the correct decision. I can't see any negatives to this other than there's the argument, of course, like, oh, they wasted resources. Sure, maybe they wasted an hour making this. I can tell you from direct experience as somebody who has made a mod that re-adds jars, it took me 20 minutes to turn jars back on and make them craftable with a crucible, which is what my mod also did, and add the refund option back. So they didn't waste much resources on that aspect of it. The majority of the resources, I imagine, were adding the new UI element for the refundable jars and the actual model of the jar, but I suspect they already had the model for the jar because they were obviously using the new model for water and stuff. They just never implemented the empty one. So this probably took them 2 hours to do, so I wouldn't worry about them wasting too much resources on this. Where the resources were wasted was the whole, like, 3 years we spent trying to make the dew collector work when just people weren't really responding to it well. If you like the dew collector, well, you can scrap all the jars you find, you can turn the refund chance to 0, and you can live off the dew collector. There you go. Problem solved. Everybody's mostly happy. If you want to see the full list of 7 Days to Die 2.5 features, click this link appearing on screen right now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.